Hi, and welcome to the Balanced Parent Show. I'm your host, Connie Lee, and today's guest is Marisa Murray. Marisa has over 2 decades of success in business and technology. A former partner with Accenture and vice president at Bell Canada, Marisa has built strategy, business transformation, governance, and change management skills during her accelerated career path. Now, as a certified executive coach, she helps business leaders improve performance and leadership competencies. She's also the author of Work Smart, Your Formula for Unprecedented Success. And when not working, she spends time with her husband and 2 sons. Welcome, Marisa, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Connie.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you today. Can you just share a little bit about your journey? Like, you were very successful in your career, and then you went to your own business. So.
Yes. I like to actually, on a good day, consider myself still very successful. So, without dragging through all the details, I was a engineer by training, so a chemical engineer for the University of Waterloo. I worked as an engineer for 5 years. And then I did my MBA at Queen's, and then I joined Anderson Consulting at the time, which became Accenture. And I spent 15 years there, making my way up to partner, which was really fun, really very exciting career path, lots of different projects, lots of global teams, many clients, lots of support in terms of my leadership development. I had 3 executive coaches as well when I was at Accenture, so very enriching time. And then I decided to leave and take a role in industry. I thought, it was time, with consulting at one point you sort of figure like maybe I should just kind of stop consulting and actually become part of a leadership team. So I took on a role with Bell Canada as vice president in their business-to-business marketplace in the East. And then I went out to dinner one night with my husband. We were celebrating actually a performance bonus. I was clinking glasses with him because we were having my favorite champagne. And I kind of confessed to him that I was sort of sad, and I don't know what happened, but he kind of dared me to quit. And a light bulb kind of went off in my head and said, like, I could quit, and I hadn't really considered that. Like, that wasn't my shtick. I didn't quit. I delivered and got promoted. That was my deal.
Yeah.
But I sort of said to him, like, I don't want to do this anymore. And he was like, well, what are you doing it for? Everything you've ever set your mind to, you've achieved. And like, if this is not it, then you should get busy doing something else. And if you don't do that, it's just, you're scared. So I was like, so I quit my job the very next day, really without a plan. I woke up the next morning sort of trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I realized that sort of all the things that had sort of plagued me in the workforce were now plaguing me as I sort of tried to discover and figure out. I knew I wanted to kind of do something very different. I kind of wanted to own my own brand, do my own thing, be my own boss. That's about all I knew. And then I realized that all the things that I hadn't been doing around reflecting on what my goals were, around building relationships that support my goals, and all this kind of stuff were the things that I had to be working on. I'd loved my experience with my executive coaches. So then I decided I'll take the executive coaching certification. I began serving my clients, and really the last 3 years has been my kind of growth journey with my clients' growth journey, just figuring out and literally I'm a former engineer. So I was like, what's the formula? Like, what did I miss? What's the formula? What are all the things we need to get right so that we can, fully enjoy our lives, frankly. And of course I have a wonderful husband and I have 2 amazing children, and I don't like this, we can't have it all nonsense. Like, we have to have it all. Like, this is like, we have to, because all of it is fun, and we're most fun when we have all of it. So I did finally write a book. I wrote all this stuff down, mostly to organize it for my own self and for my clients. So that's what I'm passionate about working about these days. That's a little of my story.
Yeah, I love that story about your husband kind of challenging you. And I just think it's so amazing because there's obviously this, the support behind it, right? Because a lot of people get scared. Like, you're celebrating this big win, and he's like, well, why don't you quit? It's like, so.
Yeah, it was really kind of shocking. I think, you know what really hit him, because it's not like we hadn't had these conversations before where I'd gone through ups and downs. I mean, when I first said I'm kind of sad, he said, oh, I know you, you'll get your team in place, you'll transform the place, you'll get it what you need it to be, and you're gonna, that was his first line of, it was like a little pep talk back. But then I said, yeah, I know I'll conquer it, but I wish I could wish the next 18 months of my life away while I had to do it. And when I said I wanted to wish the next 18 months of my life away, it really hit him. Like, he was like, you don't want to live the next 18 months of your life because you don't want to do the work to get to some promised land where you're going to get promoted in 18 months. Like, this is where he was like, this is insanity if that's the case, because in 18 months, you're going to have that place cooking with oil, and they're going to promote you, and you're going to have another 18 months where you're trying to get some new organization in order, right? Yeah. So he just saw the insanity of that statement of not wanting to live the next 18 months of my life. And that was really what pushed him to really push me and say, like, if that's true, and I couldn't deny that it was true. I'd kind of gotten into this mode where I felt like I was knuckle down, get it done, and then there'll be some promised land at the end. And then, like, I don't know what I was doing, and it was, the reality is I achieved a lot in my life because I was very goal oriented and very driven and all that kind of stuff. But if you don't enjoy any of the process, like, something's got to be really wrong, because that's your whole life. That's that just means that all you get to do is celebrate the champagne over one dinner, and then you've got your next drama to deal with, right?
Yeah, exactly. So your kids were still quite young when you were in corporate.
Yeah.
How did you balance, like, the family life with that?
Yeah. So, like, I share that, like, so many times when people hear that I left corporate and started my own company, they always assume it's because I wanted more work-life balance. And I don't always correct them, but I mean, the reality is that's not true. Like, I didn't leave corporate because I couldn't balance work and life. It is more challenging. It is easier when you have autonomy to do that, but that's not why I left. I had a good engine happening in terms of being able to balance my life. And when I think about, like, what, I used to talk to, I spoke at International Women's Day often, and people would ask me particularly when I was a partner at Accenture, like, how do I do it all? Yeah. And I would basically sort of tell them about a handful of things. Like, number one is I married well. Like, I married somebody who I met my husband at 3M when I was working as an engineer, and he met me in a work context, and he loved me because I was a professional person, not in spite of. So, like, our relationship was always like, some of my friends, I think it's like their spouses love them despite their work, in spite of their work, rather than in part because of their work, right? Whereas our relationship, it's probably bad, but we fell in love kind of working and achieving and doing projects together. And so there's a part of us that just was founded in that, he loves me in part because of my work, not in spite of it. And so what that enables when you're married to somebody like that is that means that they have compassion and empathy for the fact that that's a big part of who you are, and that they have to do their part to help you maintain that, because if you're able to maintain that, that's the person that they love. They love that person, that whole person. So I don't know if this is bad advice for some people, but I mean, number one is I married well. The second thing that I think we have is that we're constantly, and we were constantly evaluating the support people that we were bringing into our lives, and doing that with agility. So, like, it's easy to sort of either get a daycare or get a nanny or get a babysitter and just not want to change anything because nothing's really broken. But the reality with kids is the dynamics of your needs and the reality of your career and your role, the dynamics of your needs constantly change. And we had to keep checking in and being like, is this working? Is this working? So we had every combination of childcare at one point. We had to switch care providers that we loved just because the kids weren't as energized about being with them. And we wanted to make sure that when they were with care providers, they were energized. So we went from, you know, older, more nurturing when they were younger to younger and funkier as they became older. And, you know, just a mix of a mix of different extracurricular activities. I mean, basically we both we don't have family in town. Neither of us have family in town. Neither of us has parents in town. So we don't have sort of that thing. So we really had to just keep looking and blocking and tackling at every age range of the kids. My kids are now 14 and 10, but at every age range of the kids, what do they need? And what do we need as a support group? You know, what do we need in terms of, and we would sometimes we'd be willing to throw money at the problem, even when it wasn't the easiest thing to invest in, because we knew that frankly, it was what was important for our family at the time. So that's a little bit of an agility around those things. And then I guess the other big component of it was me taking responsibility for my anxieties, fears, vulnerabilities, like not transferring that stuff to my kids and my family and whatever. So I you know, what's really present in my mind is I used to go to India quite often because I had a large team in India. So it's like an 18-hour flight to go to India, and I'd go for a couple weeks at a time. And I hated missing weekends. There was something about missing a weekend with my kids that kind of ripped my heart out. And I would always get on the plane and I would cry for like the first 9 hours of the flight. And it was always the same flight crew, so they would always see me and they'd be like, oh, don't worry about her. She like cries for the first 9 hours. And it was like part of my process to just like let myself cry, like let myself be sad, not like blame that on anybody, mean that I had to change that, just like mean that I just had to cry. And then really engage in my work, in my love of my team in India, of like thinking about my kids, telling them about my kids, bringing crazy presents home for my kids, that games they never would have seen, introducing them to my, you know, showing videos of my colleagues' Indian kids that were the same age, and like just trying to integrate and love the complete and fullness of my life was so important, rather than constantly trying to, you know, fight reality or fight this complex dynamic. And so I think that so much of it is, you know, the kids are great if you're great, right? Like, yeah. And then the in parallel with that is, you know, my husband, because I left them alone enough time, my husband was able to develop the kind of relationship with my kids that I just think is phenomenal. I mean, they have boy time together. It's deplorable sometimes. Like I come home from a business trip and they're all watching TV in their underwear. Like, and I'm like, have we forgotten that we wear clothes in this house? Like, Mommy, it's boys' night. This is a boys' night, you know? So there's some neat things that happen when I'm away that don't happen when I'm present.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you never know those things if you're so, you know, if you're so focused on, if you don't even sort of appreciate that lightness or that possibility, then you miss it. You don't see it.
Right.
So anyway, those are some tips around kind of how I worked through.
Yeah. And like, especially with the third point, it was like a lot of just your perspective, because I think we get caught up in, you know, like parent guilt, and we kind of buy into that story of like, I'm supposed to always be around my child. Yeah. And so for you, it was like you just kind of shifted the way that you're viewing it.
Yes.
So yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And the biggest mistake I made, just to close this out, so the biggest mistake I made was not on balancing. The biggest mistake was on not staying attuned to like all the things I still wanted to do in my career. Like I started to follow, I had sponsors that gave me jobs. I had opportunities. I had this sort of group of people that helped pull me to certain spots. And what happened to me was I stopped dreaming about where I wanted to be. I mean, what my unique thing was in this, what I uniquely wanted to work on next. And I kept following what I had become good at and what other people knew me for. Oh. Because I didn't pay enough attention to what was really jazzing me.
Right.
And so then I ended up in a place where I was like, I don't like my job anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what forced so that's what so now what I love to do with my clients is say, like, you know, you don't have to change anything with your job right now. Just practice all this, even if you want to leave your job. You can practice all the skills that will help you navigate your future in your current reality. That will also be necessary if you decide to run your own show, you know? I mean, but I think it's those tactics that I think are the ones that I have come to more recently, that had I had that combination, I think that, you know, arguably I might still be there, although I have no regrets, because this is a phenomenal journey that's enabled all these other things. So, you know, it's always funny when people are like, would you go back? I'm like, I don't think so, because I'm just on this new wave. But I have to admit that there was a path there too.
Right, right. Can you share a little bit about your Work Smart system?
Yeah, sure. So Work Smart is an acronym. W stands for well, O stands for opportunity orientation, R stands for relationship driven, K stands for kind, S stands for successful, M stands for managerial, A stands for action orientation, R stands for resiliency, and T stands for tenacity. So basically it's a framework. There's 50 what I will call tactics, techniques, tools in the book across those 9 different parameters. And it's I believe it's the formula. So the formula, in the sense that, you know, W and well, you know, to be well, you have to really get some fundamental stuff down. You have to get sleep, good food, exercise, human connections. You have to really make sure you're getting enough love in your life, and stillness, which for me, I never did. I never did any kind of meditation or stillness practice, and I kind of abandoned prayer slowly over my life, you know. So, I mean, stillness was really new to me, but stillness has transformed my life. So I just realized, as much as my body needs exercise, my brain needs stillness, because my brain needs space, right? And it doesn't get space, it gets filled up with thought. I like to think of my brain as like the worst episode of those hoarder houses, you know, when you see the shows on hoarders. Like, I like to think of my brain as like that. It is like that, full of like unuseful, dusty thoughts and stuff that just overcrowd it. And what my stillness practice does is it's basically, it's releasing those things. It's just letting them go, and it's making space so that there's room for new thinking, right? So that's well. But, you know, opportunity orientation is really all about attitude. It's all about sort of seeing, how do you really see, you know, what do the top leaders do to kind of keep themselves in that mode where the glass is always half full, or they're always able to drive through that? And how do you access that part of your brain? I fell in love when I learned about my prefrontal cortex. Like, I literally talked to her. She's lovely. She's right here. Because, you know, that's where our best selves are, right? So that's opportunity orientation. Relationship driven is really one of people's favorite chapter, and it's all about nurturing and developing professional relationships that enable you to get where you want to be, because you cannot achieve the success you desire on your own. You just can't, plain and simple.
So true. Yeah. So
that's sort of all those kind of key skills. Kind is a whole bunch of things where, you know, how do you, you know, I was managed by a lot of people that used a lot of positional power to kind of get things done. And that doesn't really work anymore. And it doesn't bring the best out of everybody. And it actually is sort of a dying model. And so the kind chapter is all about, how do you lead with kindness? Like, how do you, versus power? And, you know, and lots of really kind of interesting things there. Anyway, I could go on and on with every chapter, but they're all sort of like they're different kind of angles. And each of them has, I don't know, 6 or 7 kind of core things that you can play with, in your existing environment.
Yeah, you bring a unique perspective, that's for sure. Like, some things that I wouldn't have thought of. So yeah, it's a great system.
Yeah, I mean, ways, it's all been said, right? We all know it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So much of it we know. But what I tried to bring was like little, twists
Right.
for us to sort of see it differently, because I needed twists to sort of
Yeah.
see it differently. Like, it's really because I need it. I can't listen to the same old thing anymore. Like, I know it, but how do you do it? So
Right.
a lot of them are just trying to, I find that the secret sauce is in when we get into our playfulness, when we get into experimentation, when we're trying to accelerate our learning, when we take ego drifts. Like, I love it when I just sort of feel like I'm on the edge of my ego's getting all scared. Like, I'm like, you go, girl. Like, so it's just how we sort of combat some of those, the things that we know we have to do, but are frankly really difficult to do in a big way. But they are easy to do if you sneak up on them.
Right. Right. I think you just kind of answered my next question, but I was going to ask, what's been your secret to success? Like, what?
Yeah.
You're obviously very successful in all areas of your life.
I think a lot of it is attitude, for sure. Like, my last chapter is on tenacity, and tenacity to me is, it's, in fact, I use the word tenacity where other people might use the word grit, but I don't like grit. I like tenacity. Grit to me is like, it's my form of discipline and force and get there, and come hell or high water, I'm going to get there. Like, that's what that word says to me, right? I mean, It's not probably what it's intended to mean, and it certainly isn't in Angela Duckworth's work. It's not intended to be that. It's passion, purpose, and I can't remember the third, but she eloquently frames out grit in that very popular book. Well, but the word grit itself, when I get into grit, it's not my best self. My best self is when I'm in this thing that I like to think of as tenacity, which is, and I define it as holding certainty of an outcome in advance of evidence, in advance of any evidence, right? So it's this piece of, holding this space, and it can be with everything. It can be with your 2-year-old. It can be like, this 2-year-old is not sleeping, is temper tantruming every day, is crying all the time, right? So there is no evidence that this 2-year-old is going to turn into an amazing human being. There's just no evidence, right? But as parents, we are tenacious about that. We are like, there is no evidence, but we are certain that this being is going to be phenomenal, right? And that's what gives us the energy to continuously, to step into that journey every day and just do our best unrelentingly to make that so.
Yeah.
And so that notion of tenacity for me has been, just really important. Like, just check my thinking. Do I really hold certainty of this eventual outcome? And if I do, then I'm able to get into the doing. But if I allow that thing to waver, like, all hell breaks loose. Like, seriously, it's like a house of cards comes tumbling down in terms of, your motivation, your productivity, your, even your creativity. I mean, just everything falls apart. So, and tenacity is interesting too, because it grows the bigger you dream. Like, there's this exercise I had to do called, I think it was one of my coaching courses. I had to do 100 aspirations. I had to write 100 aspirations.
Wow. And
I had to answer the question, wouldn't it be great if, and write 100 answers. I didn't get to 100. I didn't finish my homework. I got to 57. And I was like, that's all I can do. That's all I got. And I thought the exercise was a little bit silly, because by the time you start getting like pretty far down your list, you're making up like what seems like ridiculous things. Like, they just seem ridiculous. But what was really funny about the exercise for me is number 57 was, wouldn't it be great if I spoke to a sold out stadium, like of 40,000 people?
Nice. Okay.
And it's the silliest statement ever. I don't know what I would say. And I don't really want, like, it's not really an aspiration, but it's like, wouldn't it be great if I spoke to a sold out stadium of 40,000 people? And then I just closed the book because I was so like done with my homework. And the next day I was speaking to a group of 600 people, but it was a big production for a client of mine. And it was, you know, when they have the walk-on music and the CEO was talking right before I was on, and he kept teeing up my speech like I was going to like change the world. And I started to get like a little bit more scared, because he kept like building like, oh, and we have this great expert speaker on. I was talking about challenging conversations, and this expert teacher is going to tell us all about how to navigate challenging conversations. And I just thought like, oh my God. And then just before I walked on stage, I looked at the group and I thought the thought that came in my head was, well, this is easier than a stadium full of 40,000 people. And all of a sudden I felt calmer. So
Nice.
just by writing an aspiration, like even though it's like it has this habit of making us just a tiny bit braver.
Yeah.
You know, and the nice thing about aspirations too is that they're not goals. Like the rule is they have no timeline, and they just sound cool.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to know how to get there, and you don't have to have a timeline on it. And for me, that's really important to have sort of that tap into sort of a little bit of that dream energy.
Yeah.
To kind of bolster my tenacity.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, that's probably an exercise I'm going to try after.
Yeah, let me know if you get past 57. I should really go back to it and finish it, but
yeah, and see what you've achieved. Like cross out the ones that you've done.
True.
Yeah, I did like a similar thing. Like I challenged myself to write as many things that are abundant in my life.
Oh, nice.
And at first it starts with like, you know, it started with like the money or whatever, but then it started to become like the leaves on the tree, you know, and then you start seeing like, wow, look at like everything I have in my life, right? Yeah. So those exercises.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. So what are you working on these days?
Yeah. So pushing it deeper. It's so funny.
Nice.
I think even like all the tips in the book, I'm thinking just specifically of the relationship driven one, right? So one of the things I talk about in relationship driven, and one thing that I work a lot with my one-on-one clients with, and also my speaking, is listening skills. You know, we think we're good listeners. I'm supposed to be a particularly good listener in my field. But you know, there's like peel the onion layers of listening. So, you know, we talk about how do you listen, we all listen for content sort of, although we often are listening with an agenda. We're listening with seeing if we agree or disagree, seeing what that sounds like we already know. You know, we're already listening with like a lot of noise in the background. But even if we can quiet down the noise and just listen to the content, that's a big step. But then you're like, but now are you listening for feelings? So as somebody's speaking, are you really listening to the content, but you're really listening to the feelings? And then as you're listening to the feelings, are you listening to the context that is driving those feelings? And then, you know, like you just sort of like, and then are you listening to the criteria behind the way they're viewed of the world? And like, there's crazy amounts of depth and power sometimes in just these very simple acts. And what I find when people start to do them, and I do them with my clients, and I get my clients to go do them with their people, or I even did like a crazy demo in a room full of people. It was so funny. I just picked one random person in the audience, and I said, I'm just going to talk to you, and we're all going to listen for your feelings. So I don't want anyone listening to what he says. I want you guys all just listening to your feelings, and we're going to guess what you're feeling, and then you're going to see if we're right. So we just sort of did this demo. And it was really funny because I started talking to this guy, and I was like, so hi, how are you? And he was so funny because he started to say, well, I'm actually like pretty annoyed that you just randomly picked me. Like I'm sick. I don't feel like talking. Like I don't feel like standing up. Like, you know, you really should think about the impact of just picking somebody like randomly like this.
Yeah.
And so I was like, pause, close the curtain. Okay, what feelings do we hear? Right? What do we hear? And the whole room started laughing. The whole room said, he's totally like hassling you and joking with you. And he was, but he didn't sound like he was. And he didn't say that he was. He was really like acting mad, sounding mad. But it was because we were so attentive to listening for the feeling that we could all feel like he's totally joking with you. And
wow,
we
that's
tried, you know, and it was so funny, and the room find it so hysterical.
Yeah.
Because they realized that we could have missed that. Like
Yeah.
we really could have missed that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just, I don't know, when you say, what am I working on more? Like I'm fascinated by just like going deeper and deeper, because I think our sense of connection, our pleasure in our work, our effectiveness in our work, our joy in our lives, like I think this is where all the good stuff is, you know, and it changes every aspect of my life. It changes my work, it changes my relationships, it changes how I raise my kids. I mean, I'm so different with my kids now. I mean, they have no idea, but like they have a totally different parent, because the more I focused on designing my life, the more I'm letting them design theirs.
Oh, nice.
Like the more I'm getting intrinsically motivated versus extrinsically motivated, the more I'm letting them follow their intrinsic motivations rather than forcing external motivations on. I mean, I'm like, they have no idea.
Yeah.
They actually don't even, like, I'll say like, do you remember what it's like when I was traveling? They don't remember anything. Like they just, like, they're like, it's always been like this. You've always, you know, like,
Yeah.
so you know, they're funny, because I always, like, sometimes you want credit too. Like, aren't I a much better mom now? And they're just like, you've always been a good mom. So, anyway, I don't know if that answered your question. I mean, I guess I'm still in the stages of, you know, enjoying the feedback from my book, enjoying how the book seeds sort of the next level of what we might need to go to, doing more group work, and loving my one-on-one work as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So how can the audience connect with you? Oh,
so I'm on LinkedIn, but I'm like not the most social media active person, but I do absolutely love when people connect with me there. But mostly I'm a little old school, like email me, go to my website, ask for a touch point. Like, yeah, email me. Isn't that old fashioned? And call me.
Do you want to share your email address?
Yeah, sure. So my website's just my name, because when I started my business, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew my name. So my website's www.marisamurray.com, and my email address is just marisa@marisamurray.com. So
nice.
Very, very simple.
Awesome. So you gave us a lot of good tips and strategies, and it was great to hear how you were, like, just your perspective on work-life balance and like how to balance family. So that was amazing. So great. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.